Academic Misconduct, a podcast series for staff, students and academic managers, presented by Tara Brabazon. Hello and welcome to this third podcast, the final podcast on academic misconduct, but this case for academic managers. 10 tips will be presented, and let's go to the first. Tip 1. Beware Turnitin false positives. Turnitin is software, and like all software, it has quirks, it has weirdness, but also it's probably only as good as its operator. So do check the false positives that very frequently emerge from inexperienced staff who have never used it before. So check how staff have set up the software. Best example is, are the quotes excluded? The quotations have to be excluded in Turnitin, or else you're going to get a very high false positive. I had a staff member who, for about 2 years, would almost every assignment that students submitted in this course, and thankfully they were relatively small courses, she would present for academic misconduct because of the Turnitin report. And every single case she presented, I had to explain to her, you have set up the software incorrectly, you have not excluded the quotations. So the students, and this was like a history subject, so students were using quotes correctly with the quotation marks, no problems at all, academic integrity in place, no worries, but because the quotations were being picked up, this incredibly high false positive was being revealed time and time again. Just remember, as an academic manager, do not accept the Turnitin report. Look at it, but also look at the sources that it is picking up. And every now and again you will see it is picking up directly and legitimately quoted statements from others that are referenced correctly. That is a false positive. So false positives do exist. We'll talk about other scenarios where that takes place, but short papers, they often take place. Reference lists are often picked up. If the university has a standard title page, for example, invariably the title page is picked up. So remember, in a short paper of 250 words, if you're picking up the reference list and you're picking up the cover sheet, then you're already at about 20% in very short papers, 250, 300 words. So beware those false positives. Look at what is being picked up. And if staff don't know how to exclude quotes, teach them. Tip 2. Very important one, really. This is about the vibe that those of us who are academic managers who assess these cases, this is about the vibe we have as we assess them. So while the phrase academic misconduct is a phrase in the negative, remember that our focus is academic integrity. While academic misconduct should be punished, the goal is to fix the problem. That's the point. The goal is to fix this problem so that the student does not present this issue again. Our goal is to make sure that students are given an opportunity to develop information literacy in future work. So I see the academic misconduct process as a form of meta-learning. And I think if we approach it in that way, that yes, the student has done the wrong thing and will be punished, but our goal is to make sure that they learn from this so they don't appear in our offices again. So I see it as a meta-learning experience for the student. Tip 3, again very important one. Take the case out of the hands of the academic. Remind them that academic misconduct is separate from assessment. It is a distinct, separate and independent process. So the point of an academic manager evaluating the data is so that we don't know the student. We're not teaching the student. We're not emotionally involved in what's going on there. And you see, that's the point. It's being removed from the academic's hands so that all the stuff that may or may not be happening in the classroom is irrelevant. We are simply assessing the evidence. So really ensure in your office that there is a profound separation from once the academic reports the academic misconduct and presents the evidence, that they then must be cut off for the bulk of the process. They are then not involved in the process. We are simply assessing the case. So do make sure there is a separation of powers here. Very, very important, so that the student is given the opportunity for justice. Tip 4. Academic misconduct must be based on evidence. Academic misconduct is a very, very serious charge. The overwhelming majority of students I talk to going through an academic misconduct process cry through the phone call. That's how serious this is. So you're talking to someone gently and respectfully, and they're so upset by what's happened, they are sobbing, okay? So don't think the students aren't taking this seriously. They certainly are. But it has to be proven. And the burden of evidence is on to the academic to prove to the academic manager to assess. So I'll be very clear here. The burden of proof is on us. The academic has to provide us with evidence. And our job is to gather that evidence, talk to the student, and assess what is going on here. It must be based on evidence. It's not a vibe. It's not a feeling. Our relationship or experience of the student is irrelevant. Our feelings are irrelevant. This is about evidence and the interpretation of that evidence with rigour and clarity and transparency. And we have to justify those decisions quite rightly and very clearly to anybody else who is assessing this situation. It's important to remember that these cases could end up with the Ombudsman, and we have to verify the integrity of the process as much as the outcome. Tip 5, and this is the tip particularly about small papers. As my first tip stated, don't make your judgment on the basis of software. This is particularly the case for short papers because Turnitin presents a percentage. So in, for example, a 200-word paper, Turnitin could pick up a cover sheet, pick up a reference list, and get to 11, 12, 13, 14% with ease. So for very short papers that are often called low-stakes papers these days, they have to be assessed very, very carefully. The short papers really have to be done in the old-fashioned way. Don't rely on Turnitin. Look line by line in the paper and check it off the actual sources. So really do careful and considered checking because the software is going to be less helpful in the shorter papers. Tip 6. Watch for patterns. You will find, particularly once you're in an academic management job for more than a year, that particular subjects and assignments have a greater predilection for academic misconduct. You'll find literature reviews, film summaries, or book reviews will be the worst offenders. So the same subject and the same assignments will come up time and time again. You will find this, it will be remarkable. Frequent cases of academic misconduct in the same subject often signal a problem with the selection of assessment. That's our meta role. Yes, the students may have done the wrong thing when they've produced their book summary or their film summary and, they were individually charged and had a punishment. But once you've got 3 or 4 or 5 of those in a subject, it is timely as an academic manager to bring that academic into your office and say, hi, we've had 5 cases of academic misconduct in a class of 40 in that last session for that assignment. You explain to me how that's happened. Because while the student is to blame and takes the punishment, if very poor assessment has been configured, then often academic misconduct is the canary in the mine that shows that something is wrong with that assessment. Learn from what the students are teaching you and ask the academic to have another look at their assessment matrix and make changes. Because if you've got multiple cases, multiple students are not quite getting what's going on there. Tip 7. Listen to the students. Most academic misconduct processes around the world ask for students to offer their commentary or their feedback on what has occurred. So here is the evidential base that has been configured by the academic, and we get the student response. You can do it both ways. I give students the choice. They can either offer an email commentary, a written commentary, or they can talk to me on the phone and I will take notes, configure that into notes from our discussion and present that to the higher-ups for their determination. But do note that those students are going to be desperately upset, perhaps angry. I've had some absolute screamers in the past, but they have a right to be heard. Whatever emotional state they're in, they have a right to be heard, and we must listen to what they're saying. It's always important to remember that the goal of this process is information literacy. Hear what they are telling you. Note the evidence for the process, so get their justification so you understand what's going on. That's important for this academic misconduct process. But also, through that conversation, actually work out what is happening and find out strategies to target assistance for those students in future assignments. The goal is academic integrity. Our goal, even in the darkest moments for students, is there to help them learn. So it's a form of meta-teaching, but it is based on hearing the students, hearing what they have to say, and then us providing a support structure around them. Tip 8, remain respectful throughout the process. Your goal as an academic manager is to assess the evidence. Avoid emotion, avoid name calling, avoid labels. Avoid labels of students, avoid labels of staff. The key here is we are penalising the action, not the student. But it is important to recognise how often in academic misconduct cases name calling emerges. It emerges from the staff about individual students. It emerges from the students about their teachers, that they will blame each other. Remember, it's very easy. When stuff goes wrong in our lives, it's very, very easy to create a blame culture. It's incredibly hard to look in the mirror and go, you know what, I did that. Hands up, yeah, gov, I'm stuffed. Well done. That takes courage. It takes experience to recognise life's too short, recognise the errors, learn from them, move on. That's what a grown-up does. It's very easy, though, to create a culture of blame, and you will hear some really horrendous language used to describe students or staff. It is very important, part of the meta role of an academic manager, I would argue, generally in universities, let alone in an academic misconduct process, is to create an environment of integrity, to create an environment of compassion and respectfulness. It's all about respectfulness. So, yes, the student may have done the wrong thing. Listen to the content of what they're telling you. Advise them not to label teachers. Don't create cultures of blame and shame. Simply look in the mirror and understand what has occurred. Similarly, teachers are embarrassed in some ways. If they've got 8 or 9 cases in a semester, they know, and I know, that something is going wrong in this subject. And they have a tendency, if they do, to blame the students. Oh, it's a poor group. It's poor. Really? Really? So it's a poor group and it wasn't last year and it won't be next year. But this has nothing to do with you. Right, okay. So remain respectful throughout the process. Listen to what everybody's saying. But your job is also, with integrity, to ensure that learning is taking place. Because that's what our role is in a university. In some ways, calm the staff and the students down, stop the name calling, stop the labelling, and try to really understand at a meta level what is occurring here. Tip 9. Aim for consistency and use the regulations with care and transparency. It's very important to recognise this is an emotional issue. Our role as academic managers is to apply the policy to the letter. So make sure, every university is a bit different, but make sure that you have that policy in your head. Every now and again, once a month for me, an unusual case will appear where it means I have to go back to the regulations myself and I have to go, right, well, this has happened. So if this happens, where do I go now? And most policies are very clear on the processes and procedures. So we simply go through those processes and procedures. But aim for consistency. The key in my office, and the reason why I really focus on getting these processes and procedures right, is we have to apply the policy to the letter. We have to take time to ensure that what we're giving in terms of a penalty to this student is relational to what we gave last week, last year and what we'll give next year. So ensure internal consistency. Have a notebook, as I do, for every case of academic misconduct, just so you've noted the generalities of this case and the penalty that you have given, noting the reasons for your decision making. So that ensures an internal consistency. I probably get 40 to 50 academic misconduct cases a year at the moment. So it is very important with a number of that size, so we've got 40, 50, that I'm internally consistent, and that therefore helps the university ensure internal consistency at a faculty and a university level. Tip 10. Use the full continuum of penalties that are available to you. It's very important to see academic misconduct as a continuum. It's a continuum. It starts with the very, very straightforward and minor cases, going right through to the incredibly serious cases of collusion or ripping an entire paper off the internet. We do see those. So it's very important that the academic manager understand the full spectrum of what's available to him or her in terms of penalties, but also in terms of outcomes. Remember that some cases are dismissed for a lack of evidence, so that's also part of this continuum. So we assess the case, there is not sufficient evidence, it is dismissed, and at that point that paper goes back into the assessment procedure. Remember, academic misconduct is a parallel process to assessment. So when it is reported, that assignment and that student goes into our processes and procedures. If we say, right, there is no case to answer, that student simply goes back into the assessment protocols and is given a mark and grade for that assignment. Okay, so some are dismissed, case dismissed. We have to understand, though, the full continuum. At the low end, if a student has plagiarised, thought they were paraphrasing, but plagiarised 2 sentences, a couple of sentences in an assignment, then, that's low-hanging fruit. It is still plagiarism and it still needs to be logged. So in that case, the student would receive a caution and a resubmission of that paper with a maximum of 50% given. So it is a recognition that the student has done the wrong thing. They will receive a caution. They can resubmit the paper, show that they can actually reference and fix that minor problem, but they can't get more than 50% for that assignment. So that is a penalty for, a low grade case, and hopefully it'll never appear again. But of course, and universities do differ, but cases vary from giving students reprimands, failing them on the individual assignment, failing them from the course, and of course excluding them from the university. This is a continuum, and it's a very serious continuum. So the academic manager must be dispassionate, must have ethics, must have integrity, but also understand and use the entirety of the continuum of academic misconduct regulations that are available to us. It is important to log and to understand those earlier, simpler cases, the lack of note-taking, the lack of referencing, because if it's not picked up, then the student will develop and manifest a bigger problem in second year or third year. So it is important that we don't go, oh, it's a minor case, I'm not going to be bothered. I actually put a lot of attention on those minor cases so we can handle it and we never see the student again. What I don't want is I don't want to see the same student again. I don't want to see the same student again. I want to make sure we've put a support structure around them so that we don't have repeat offenders. I think in my current job, I've only had 2 students return to me with academic misconduct, and they were simply because in the first case, they failed the subject. They actually failed the subject, and when they got an opportunity to do the subject again the following year, they submitted the same assignment that they submitted the previous year. So it was picked up, the overlap was picked up. So that was the case that I'm very upset about, because the student actually did reappear. Do recognise that serious cases will appear. Most are not super serious, but about 1 in 10 will take your breath away. And those serious cases must be dealt with. And also recognise too the little errors that first years will show from a lack of experience are very, very different from the errors that we'll see in master's students. So if you're handling master's students in academic misconduct, they are much more serious. So the moment we go into postgraduate education, deal with those cases with profound seriousness, because we're dealing with experienced students. They're getting a master's degree. That means something. Every assessment is worth a lot more at that level, so we really have to show rigour and care in our master's courses, coursework masters. Can I also just offer a little caveat that does worry me around the world, and that is doctoral regulations really are disconnected from academic misconduct regulations. And I believe very, very strongly that we need accurate and proper academic misconduct regulations for doctoral education. Just to put that out in the universe, put that out to podcast listeners. If you have an opportunity to say to the higher-ups in your university, we do need careful, concrete, distinctive and targeted academic misconduct regulations for doctoral education. Please push that thought, if you can, for me and for our future students, because doctoral education should not be dealt with using the same protocols and processes as we deal with first-year undergraduate students. Work through the continuum, understand the continuum of penalties that are available to you, and remember those really serious cases, those 1 in 10, really do matter, and ensure that those students are penalised. Yes, they learn from it. We want all students to learn, but the serious cases, the really serious cases where the student has stolen work, taken other people's work and called it their own, we have to recognise that, and we have to ensure that that is penalised, and penalised strongly. I wish all the academic managers out there great luck to you. It is a privilege. It's a difficult job, but it is a privilege to be involved in this intimate and caring and careful way with both our academics and our students to develop academic integrity in our universities. Because my line is, if we don't have academic integrity in our universities, we might as well close shop now. So we are the guardians of academic integrity, and it is a privilege to do that. We have to do it with care, with respect, with compassion, but also with integrity. Every best wish to you and every good luck.